It happened years ago when I was tasked with babysitting my cousin and his 4 friends during a sleepover. My uncle offered me $100 for the night, which I thought would be the easiest money I'd ever make. All I had to do was hang out in the basement, playing video games with a group of 10-year-olds. For most of the night, everything was fine, until I heard footsteps coming from upstairs. We were still in the basement, controllers in hand, when 2 of the kids paused, clearly hearing the same sound. I glanced around to confirm all 5 kids were sitting on the couches. My aunt and uncle weren't supposed to be home that night, so who or what was upstairs? A chill ran down my spine when I noticed the basement door was wide open. I told the kids to stay put and bolted upstairs to shut it. The door didn't lock from the inside, only the outside, which made things worse. I hurried back down and instructed the kids to hide in the workout room. Turning off the lights and TV, I joined them in the dark. We listened in silence as the footsteps grew louder, descending the stairs one by one. The sound was heavy, deliberate, and every step made my stomach sink further. One of the kids started crying, and I had to hiss at them to be quiet. Using every ounce of strength, I braced the workout room door with a chair and piled barbell weights against it. We heard the boiler room door creak open and close, followed by an unbearable silence. Then came the sound of our doorknob turning. My heart raced as I pushed against the door with all my might. Whoever it was quickly gave up and retreated. Moments later, the rushed footsteps pounded up the stairs. From the direction of the front door, I heard the unmistakable sound of it slamming shut. With no cell phone to call for help, I waited until I was sure the intruder was gone before searching the house. The front door had been left open, and the bedrooms upstairs were trashed. A few things were stolen, but everyone was safe. That was all that mattered. This happened during a blizzard in Valley Stream. I was paid $250 to babysit a boy named Matthew while his parents were away for the weekend. It was the first night, Friday, and Matthew had already gone to bed. I was in the living room watching a movie when there was a sudden knock at the door. I glanced at the clock. It was close to midnight. Something about it felt off, so I ignored it. But barely 10 seconds later, furious pounding began, accompanied by voices shouting, "Open the door! Open the fucking door!" My heart dropped. I peeked through the blinds and froze. A man stood just outside the window, staring in. Panicking, I stumbled backward and nearly fell. Fighting the rising fear, I grabbed the kitchen phone to call the police. The operator informed me that due to the weather, it could take time for officers to arrive. I was instructed to grab the child and find a safe place to hide. I agreed, but hung up in my panic. The pounding suddenly stopped. I tiptoed to the living room window and peeked again. The man was gone. But then came the sound of shattering glass from another part of the house. My knees felt like they would give out as I realized they were breaking in. I sprinted upstairs to grab Matthew. He was still asleep, but there was no time to explain. I clamped my hand over his mouth to keep him quiet and carried him into his toy closet. As we huddled in the dark, I could hear their footsteps on the stairs, accompanied by cruel laughter. It felt like an eternity. The footsteps grew louder, and then they entered the bedroom. My chest tightened as I realized there was nowhere else to hide. Just when I thought we were done for, a police siren wailed in the distance. "Shit!" one of the intruders cursed. The footsteps rushed out of the room and down the stairs. From the closet, I listened to the commotion as they fled. Later, the police found 5 men hiding in a shed in the backyard. Thankfully, Matthew and I were unharmed, but the memory of that night still haunts me. I was 15, still babysitting because I couldn't get a real job yet. What happened that night was, without a doubt, the most terrifying experience of my life. I was looking after an 8-year-old boy named Mike, and we decided to take his dog for a walk in the woods behind his house. Everything was fine until the dog suddenly froze, ears pointed, and began sniffing the air intently. A moment later, it erupted into frantic barking, tugging at the leash with a wild desperation. I immediately assumed it was a black bear, so I told Mike to turn around and head back toward the house. Struggling to pull the dog in the opposite direction, I scanned the trees for any movement. And then I saw him. Behind one of the large trees stood a man just staring at me. His stillness was unnerving. My voice cracked as I shouted, asking if he needed anything. He didn't respond. Instead, he turned around and walked off into the woods. My pulse was racing, but I managed to calm the dog down enough to head back to the house. We hadn't gone far when the dog started barking again, this time at something behind us. I couldn't see anything, but my gut told me it might be the same man. I didn't dare look back. Every instinct screamed at me to get to the house as fast as I could, so I hurried Mike along while dragging the dog behind me. The barking didn't stop until we reached the house. Once inside, I locked every door and window, checking them repeatedly for the next half hour to make sure we were safe. Eventually, I convinced myself that it was over. Mike and I settled on the couch to play Mario Kart, trying to shake off the unease. But then, outside on the patio, I heard the sharp crash of something falling over. My stomach dropped. Flicking on the patio light, I saw one of the toy buckets, a green one filled with beach toys, spilled over. It wasn't something a small animal could have knocked over. The dog was barking hysterically again, its nose pressed against the window. I knew I needed to protect us, so I told Mike to fetch his dad's hunting rifle. Looking back, it wasn't the smartest idea to ask an 8-year-old to grab a gun, but I was too scared to think clearly. As the minutes dragged on, strange noises came from all around the house. Faint taps on the windows, the chimes on the porch swaying, objects being knocked over outside. And then I saw him. Through the window, he passed by slowly, but he stopped when he noticed me looking. For a brief, horrible moment, he crouched down, staring directly at me. His eyes felt like they were burning into my soul. I lifted the rifle to show him I was armed, and after a long, tense standoff, he finally retreated back into the woods. That night, I barely slept. Every creak, every gust of wind outside made my heart leap. A week later, Mike's parents called me. They said a strange, creepy man had been spotted stalking their house from the woods. They asked me to describe the man I'd seen. I couldn't give them much. He never got close enough for me to make out his features, but I was certain it was the same person. They asked me to babysit a few more times after that, but I always declined. I couldn't bring myself to go back. Years have passed, and I have no idea what became of Mike's family, or the man who haunted their home. Between the ages of 15 and 18, I babysat frequently. Living near a wealthy area had its perks. The pay was good, and there was always someone in need of a sitter. Over the years, I'd looked after some unusual kids, but none of them compared to Michael. From the moment I met him, something about Michael felt off. He was quiet, almost unnervingly so, and at 12 years old, he was old enough to stay home alone for a few hours, but not overnight. His parents needed me to stay the night and warned me that he could be a bit strange and might need extra attention. Michael spent most of his time in the toy closet of the room where I'd be sleeping. It was huge, large enough to fit a Lego play table surrounded by bins of toys. For hours, he sat in there, building with Legos and muttering to himself. At first, I thought he was just play-talking, but the tone of his voice didn't sound playful. It sounded like he was having an actual conversation. I decided not to overthink it. He came downstairs once to grab some leftovers from the fridge, but then he went right back to the closet. It wasn't until I told him it was bedtime that he finally left it. By then, I was ready to crash myself. Sometime during the night, I woke up to the sound of Legos clicking together. It was faint, but unmistakable. Groggy, I called out, "Michael, go to sleep." The noises stopped. That's when I noticed something strange. The closet light wasn't on. How could he be playing in the dark? Confused, I got up, walked over to the closet and opened the door. It was pitch black inside, and Michael wasn't there. The toys were undisturbed. I told myself it was nothing, probably just a dream or my mind playing tricks on me. Shaking it off, I went back to bed. About an hour later, I woke up again. This time, the closet light was on, casting a soft glow across the room. The door was shut, but I could see the faint outline of 2 feet at the bottom of the door. Frustrated, I called out his name. "Michael, this isn't funny. Go to bed." A quiet, childlike giggle answered me from inside the closet. Now I was annoyed. Certain he was messing with me, I marched over and yanked the door open, only to stagger back in terror. The closet was empty. There was nothing there. Where the feet had been, there was now only bare floor. My heart pounded painfully in my chest as I stumbled out of the room and into Michael's bedroom. He was sound asleep in his bed, undisturbed. Shaking, I locked his door and lay down on the floor beside his bed. Just being near another person felt safer somehow. I stayed there until morning. When his parents returned the next day, I didn't say a word about what happened. I wasn't sure if they'd believe me, or if I even believed it myself. I got paid, left the house, and never agreed to babysit Michael again. Even now, the memory gives me chills. I know what I saw, or at least I think I do, but to this day, I have no idea how to explain it.